I'm live. I am reading out of Winged Pharaoh. It's a far memory book by Joan Grant, published 1937. And I have already read one chapter this morning, which was chapter 8. Was it? The Driller in the Corn? No, it was chapter 9, yeah, the Temple Scribe. I'm now at chapter 10. This is a book where she is Sekita, and she is the daughter of Pharaoh, but her father died, and she has to co-rule with her brother, Nei, and she is in training for this rulership. She has been 5 years at this temple now, and we are at chapter 10, entitled Second Trial of Memory. As time passed, my memory became clearer and more detailed. One evening, before I slept beside the sanctuary, Nesara told me to return to earth 2 hours after sunrise, and in the morning, as I opened my eyes, I saw him, sitting beside me, waiting to hear what I should tell him. First I went to the wife of a farmer who, though good of heart, was foolish of tongue. She loved her husband, yet she would upbraid him if he were lazy or too full of beer, or if when he had been irrigating his fields he left not his sandals outside the door, but covered the matting of her floor with mud. Her husband saw not her love, because it was obscured from him by a thicket of thorny words. So he thought long on the girl who tended the milk cows, and who was commonly and spoke to him only with admiration on her tongue. Before she slept, the woman had prayed that her husband's love might return to her. I took her to a place where there was a wall of baked brick, and the wall was just so high that she could see over the top of it. Upon the far side she saw her husband sleeping in the cool of a fig tree. Behind him stood his idle plough, and beside him was an empty jar of beer. And she called out to him and said, "Lazy one, if your plough were as quickly as beer runs down your throat, you should be a rich man, and your sleeping would be a sign of merit instead of laziness." And as she spoke, another row of bricks appeared upon the wall. I said to her, "Sebak, do you see that wall which has grown up between you and your husband until you can no longer reach him, and now he is even hidden from your sight? Each brick of it is but a foolish word of yours, and even as you can no longer see him because of it, so can he no longer see you, and of his loneliness he has taken unto himself the girl who tends the cows. Henceforth think well before you speak. Say only those things that you would like to hear said to you by one you love. Build no more upon this barrier, and you shall find it crumbling before the love in your heart, as a wall of unbaked mud crumbles before the inundation." I think she will remember what I told her, for the picture that I made her see was better than if I had counseled her only with words. She lives in the delta, a day's journey from the sea. Her house has 5 rooms, and 3 sycamores are before her door. Is that truly recorded? Yes, and you answered her prayer with wisdom. Then I went to the country that lies westwards across the great ocean where Atlanta was. There in a great forest journeyed a man who searched for gold. When he was last born on earth he had been a noble, but he had thought not of the welfare of his people, and they that should have been to him as his own children suffered grievously of his neglect. The drainage channels were uncleared, and where there should have been rich fields, where there were swamps, where fever came with the evening. When he died he knew that he had thrown away his chance of succouring those to whom he should have been a friend, and he asked that he, who had let his people die of fever, should on earth cure others who suffered as they had suffered. In this, his next life, he was born the eldest son of a master road builder. When he was 18, he left the house of his father and set out upon a long journey, for he knew that there was something that he must find though upon earth he knew not what it was, and he thought that that it was gold, with which he could succour his fellow men. For many weeks he journeyed through great forests where fiercely growing plants made walls that shut away the sun. Then he too fell ill of the fever, and first he longed for warm coverings when his body shook with cold, and then when he burned with fever he longed for the cool sea at sunset and for the juice of fruits in a cool pitcher. And he thought that he would die, and that he would have found nothing to cure even his own suffering. Because of his fever he could see beyond the things of earth, as if for a time he were a seer. So I took upon me his semblance, and he thought he saw a vision of what he must do to cure his sickness. I went to a tree, the kahan tree, which grew near to where he was lying, and I took the bark of it and boiled it in water in an earthen pot over his cooking fire. And when it was long boiled, I drank of it, and cried out, Behold, the fever has left my bones, and I am whole. Then he saw me no longer, but I watched him crawl towards the tree, and I knew that he had remembered his vision. He had found a cure for the fever that once others suffered because of him, and so shall the scales be adjusted. Nay, said I was pleased, and I was glad that I had been the instrument by which that man had found what he had sought so long, and through his prayers to the gods had shown him how to find one of the wonders that they have made upon the earth for the assistance of mankind. Then I went to a woman who was upon her deathbed. She lived many lives' journey beyond the most northern outposts of the people of Minosas. The people of her country have no knowledge, and they think that when they die, through the memory of life may linger around the body for a short time, soon it must return to the earth from whence it came, just as water, which has for a time been shaped by a jar, loses its separateness when it's thrown back into the river. This woman had a son who longed to see beyond his horizon to new lands. So he left his home and journeyed to far countries. For a time he lived with a fisherman who collect the shellfish from which they make the violet dye. While he worked there, he met the steersman of one of our ships that bring dye and cedar wood to calm, and the steersman talked to the boy of the light and reawakened memory in him, so that he knew that the words he heard were true. When after many months he returned to his home, he thought that his village would rejoice with him in his knowledge that the widows would cease to weep, and the mothers be comforted that their dead children were not lost to them. But the people listened not to him, and they called him a dreamer and a fool, and they said he was a coward that turned his back on reality. But the boy's mother listened to him, for she loved the sound of his voice. Yet did she say, There is no proof of these things. Think not on death, for to think on death is to think of nothingness, and that be the thought of fools. The boy was sorrowful, and often prayed to the gods that his mother should not die uncomforted, lest she should walk bodiless on earth. The boy left his village and went among many people, but he found that few there were who listened to him. When I went to the woman, the time of her going was almost reached. She longed to see her son once more before she died, and her eyes were upon the door, hoping that it might open, and that she would see him again, returned from another journey. But the boy was awake, for he was upon a boat upon a rough sea, where none had time for sleep because of the storm. So I took upon myself his semblance, and let the mother see me walk through the open door. And she saw not the rest of her family, who wept beside her bed, but only me, who walked towards her. Then those who watched beside her saw her sit upright and hold out her arms, and they heard her cry, My son, you have returned to me. And as they saw her fall back dead upon the bed, she walked with me out into the sunshine through the open doorway, and I left her resting in a place of peace until her son should greet her when he slept. That was lovely. Chapter 10. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did.